Alright, so we are now at the point we are ready for takeoff. We have been cleared to do so as well by ATC, and so the last items we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to select our landing lights, our remaining landing lights to on. We would also start our elapsed time as soon as we set our takeoff thrust. And talking about takeoff thrust, we also have, of course, initial thrust that we're going to set to verify that the engines are stable before applying toga. Toga can be applied in two versions, either just like the real way by selecting either of the two toga push buttons on the thrust levers, or there is a hotkey push button right here on the screw that you can also select if you want to do so as well. The initial thrust for GE engines is going to be 55% N1, and then you apply toga when they're stable. And for Pratt & Whitney as well as Rolls-Royce engines, you would go to EPR of 1.05 approximately. The rest of the stuff is relatively standard, depending on airline company, and at rotate we're going to pitch towards about 15 degrees, or depending on what the flight director says. Then after takeoff, we're going to do all the procedures as necessary, so gear up, we're going to get the thrust reduction altitude, and we're also going to get the thrust acceleration altitude, or sorry, not the thrust, the acceleration altitude, where we're going to pitch down, speed up, and clean up the airplane as necessary. And then we're just going to follow the route. We're going to set all the required items for when we reach transition altitude as well as 10,000 feet. So let's go ahead and get started, shall we? So we're going to go and set landing lights are on, parking brake released. We're going to set our clock, so our elapsed time to on, and set approximately 1.05 EPR, which can be a little bit difficult to do, but that is done. And that's set toga thrust. Do about half yoke forward for better nose grip. Eighty knots checked. Yoke back to neutral. V1, rotate. Positive rate gears coming up. LNAV. And for demonstration purposes, we're just going to use the autopilot directly without being concentrated on the tutorial. VNAV speed, thrust ref. And we're reaching the 1,000 foot mark, so climb thrust is now set. And we're also at the acceleration altitude, so the airplane nose is going to go down. And you can see we're following our LNAV path nicely. ATC told us we're now climbed to flight level 200, which we'll go ahead and set. And the airplane should accelerate. Now, of course, we're having a little bit of turbulence, so the airspeed is a little bit wonky at the moment, but that should be no problem. Once we're above the 5 marker and accelerating, we can select flaps 1. We're now above the 5 marker, but I want to make sure we have a positive trend. Alright, there we go, flaps 1. And then the same applies for flaps up. Once we're above the 1 mark, the flaps 1 mark, and we have a positive trend, we're going to go ahead and select flaps up. Yep, I'm happy with that. Flaps up. Once flaps up is commanded up, we're going to go ahead and set our nose lights, our runway turnoff, and our taxi lights to off. And if we had our anti-ice, engine anti-ice switch to on, we would select those back to auto regardless of our icing conditions. Let's do the after takeoff checklist.
After takeoff checklist. Checklist complete.
Alright, after takeoff checklist complete, so we'll close it up again. And we'll continue on the climb. I'm going to switch over to heading mode now. And we're going to bug up as well to our current heading / our heading that we're expected to reach here in a moment. We're now reaching our transition altitude of 5,000 feet, which we should get a reminder here to set standard in any moment. There it is. And then we can do so by selecting standard on the barrel. We're going to do this on once, twice, and 3 times here as well. We needed to. And so now that's set, passing 5.8 now, checked. We're cleared to flight level 360. So we'll set that in as well. So we're just about to reach 10,000, which is the next point at which we would do our checks. So we can see the airplane is now going to accelerate at 10,000 feet ideally, or depending on what you have selected in the VNAV climb page for when this should happen. And in this time, we're going to do a couple of things. Pilot monitoring, it really doesn't matter, but we're going to pretend we're going to be here. We're going to go and deselect terrain, select weather on the side, because once you're at 10,000 feet, you don't necessarily require terrain anymore, unless you are really in those kinds of areas where terrain can be relatively high. We're going to go and select the landing lights to off, the logo light to off, and the wing light to off if that was selected on. The seatbelt signs we would select to auto if we could. This is normally done if the pitch is lower than 7.5 degrees and there is no further turbulence expected. We are going to be flying through some clouds and there is some weather ahead of us, so I'm going to go ahead and keep them on for now. That's something we could do. We're going to reset the minimums. We'll select the reset push button. And if we decided, or if we had the center pumps switched off because we didn't have efficient or sufficient fuel in the center, we would now turn them on. Or if any time the fuel and center ICAS message comes up, we would switch these on. And the same thing goes for the auxiliary fuel, or even if there is a message saying fuel low center, we would switch them off. For the pilot flying, we would also check or reset our minimums. We would check that our fuel flow is about what we would expect and nothing too crazy, which does look about right. And then we do some things in the FMC. Most notably, we're going to go to the route page and we're going to do a route copy. So if we go to route 2, we now have the copy of our active route. Not sure what's going on with the lighting there. Then we could clear out any fixed information stuff. So we're going to erase the fix here and erase our fix here. Then we're going to go to progress and just verify that we have some data here. And everything looks normal. Our fuel is now going even lower, so we need to definitely check that. This is an issue on my SimBrief profile. The aircraft is actually pretty accurate when it comes to fuel burn. It's just SimBrief is a little bit savory, if that makes sense. We just want to verify our distances haven't gone too crazy. And then if we inserted anything in the navrad page that we manually inserted, we would clear those so that we're back in auto tune mode. Again, if at any certain point ATC would ask you at what point would you reach a certain altitude, you can go to the fixed information page and insert a predicted ETA altitude here, and it should create a pseudo waypoint for you, and you can check that. Currently not implemented, but for the future reference, if once it does, you can use that to your advantage. So you heard the ping, the purser is calling, so let's go ahead and see what they have to say.
How can I help you?
Captain, would you like some coffee?
Sure.
Sure.
Would you like it with milk?
Sure.
Milk will do fine.
Got you.
Wonderful. So really at this point above flight level 100 or 10,000 feet, depending on where you're at and what transition altitude there is, really all you're going to do is you're going to continue updating your heading, following ATC instruction, and if the seatbelt sign you've kept on still is on, make sure that at some point they are off when it's feasible, and so on and so forth. So I believe we have reached a safe altitude. It did take a little while until we did reach it, where we don't really expect any turbulence, so now I think the seatbelt signs can come back to auto, and we can see that the ICAS is clear of any indications and memos, which is exactly kind of the position we want to be in. So we're now at a stage in the cruise where the fuel low center indication shows up, and we can cross-check this by opening the fuel system schematic page. And we can see that indeed it is kind of low, and the normal procedure is as soon as this comes up, we would need to select the pumps to off. But we'll go ahead and do so, which means the indication should go away. So now we're going to cover the basis of our cruise procedures and what kind of things we can expect to do if we want to go all in, or pretty much all in. I'm not going to cover absolutely everything in the most exact detail, and big emphasis on every airline does do this a little bit differently. So just because this does not match your way of doing it or your airline's way of doing it doesn't mean it doesn't match another one's. Plus there's some room for interpretation as well. It's up to you what you could do. This video is normally meant for the beginners or some that want to go a little bit deeper than just a quick startup. So we're just going to cover as much as we can that makes sense, right? And so there is an acronym, well, not really an acronym, but there is a certain tool we can use that we can follow in order so we don't forget, or you can write this down, which is basically just the alphabet up to G, so A, B, C, D, E, F, G. With each letter we have certain things we need to do. So starting at A, we're going to start with altitude readings, and we're also going to check additional wind data. So with altitude readings hourly in our flight plan, we normally have to note down RVSM requirements. So we have to insert or write down our altimeters, which we can find if I just check my flight plan here. So we go here, you can see the RVSM requirements right here. So you would insert the different RVSM altitudes that are required, and you would note those down and make sure that we are within the limit of 200 feet between both altimeters. Additional wind data is you would go to the legs, route data, and wind page, and you would update any wind data that you think would be beneficial to us. But we've already inserted quite the significant amount on the ground, and I think even sufficient amount on the ground. We don't need to do that. But if we ever did, we could do so as well here. Then B stands for books. So, for example, our flight plan, our flight log, and our debrief, things like that. C would include the route 2. So we would do a copy of the route 1 page, which we've already done, and we would plan an escape route if we needed to in the route 2 page as applicable. So if we needed to plan for our alternate, for example, in ETOPS airspace, we could do that with the route 2. So you could go to the route page, go to route 2, and you could plan anything you needed here for that event, or in case that event should occur. D stands for departure message to the central dispatch through ACARS. So we would give up our data that we needed, or that our company would need for the entire routing so far. For example, I don't know, 0 fuel weight, for example, or the estimated time of arrival, or any kind of delay codes that we needed to send off, why we are delayed if we were, and any other important messages. E stands for en route, and here we check the en route alternate weather. So we always are on our toes, making sure that if anything were to happen, what airports can we go to? What are the most efficient ways to get there? And is the weather good? This is also a perfect tool for the alternate page, which will come at a later date. F stands for FIR, and here we insert the entry, exit time, and area procedures for any of those areas that are required. And we also check things like fuel, hydraulics, engine oil, the oxygen, and do system checks. These are normally done starting at the first waypoint at the top of cruise, and normally in intervals of 45 minutes, or depending on what the routing requires. For example, over the ocean, if you're doing a NAT track, a North Atlantic track, you would probably do this every waypoint. not probably, you would do this every waypoint, even if it is less than 45 minutes, or even especially if it's more than 45 minutes. And you can do all this logging here. So you can see that at Bodzo I inserted 126.5 as my fuel that I had on board. And if we check where we're going to Apluk, so we go to progress, Apluk, we expect a fuel of 117.8. Of course, we're not going to insert that right away. We're going to insert that only once we actually pass Apluk. And if we do, we can set this here as well. And we would also insert our time that we took to reach Apluk via the ET, so the elapsed time that we have started. That's something we would do. We could check engine oil quantities, right? Like I've said, engine oil quantities, hydraulic quantities. We just go through all the system displays or the synoptic pages, making sure everything is working as expected. And then G stands for general items such as the weather radar, aircraft trimming, and if needed, for example, the primary rudder trim technique is also part of this if that was ever needed, which it is not. We could also prepare for oceanic clearance before we even apply, or before we even reach that part, normally done at least 30 minutes prior to entering the oceanic airspace. The next scenario that we'll be covering is the potential of the step climb whenever we reach it. We can verify the step climb for when it's going to happen either on the FMC progress page. You can see 2-step climb. You'll see the time, which is 15:46 Zulu and in 74 nautical miles. And you'll also see the pseudo waypoint of the step climb on the navigation display. Now there are two options that you can choose from. Either you do it the realistic way where you need to manually tune the new cruise altitude, so for example in our case 380, and then once we reach the step climb and we have been given clearance to step climb by ATC, we would press in the altitude push button, we would push it, and that will then cause the cruise altitude to switch to 380 and the airplane will climb to that altitude. The other option is if you're somebody who likes to fly overnight or is generally AFK during such long flights, there is an option where you can enable auto step climb. This option can be found under simulation, general airplane, and here is the option auto step climb. If this is enabled, the airplane should automatically manage the step climbs for you while you are AFK. Alright, so first I'm going to show you how it's done in the real world. So we would request at this point most likely to climb to flight level 380, and then you obviously don't have to be perfect on the waypoint. We just want to make sure that we climb the 380 at around this point. However, I'm going to demonstrate what if we pass the waypoint and then step climb, what kind of information we can get. So I'm going to go ahead and just pre-select 380 for now. You can see it says to step climb now. Let's go ahead and do so. We're going to push in. And now we can see thrust ref, VNAV speed, the cruise flight level. We'll also change to flight level 380, and the airplane will climb to flight level 380 accordingly. Now I'll demonstrate what will happen when the auto step climb feature is enabled. You can see it has done everything by itself and I didn't need to do anything. So the next scenario we're going to be covering is what kind of things can you do or insert for any ETOPS scenarios you may run into. Now this is going to be relatively rare for the 777 because all 777s are rated for 180 minutes these days. So running into the scenario is going to be quite rare. However, I went ahead and made the same flight plan with an ETOPS of only 60 minutes so I can demonstrate what can be done. And for this info, we're going to need to go into the OFP and we're going to go down until we reach the ETOPS section. And all we're going to insert are the entry points, the ETP1, and the exit point in our fixed info page. So we're going to make custom waypoints, which are going to be coordinate based waypoints, so that long, and we're going to insert those with a radius that we have our entry point, our ETP, and our exit point. There are occasions where you may even have two ETOPS scenarios, and because we only have 4 fixed info pages and we already require 3, we're always going to do one scenario at a time. So only once we reach the first exit will we then program the next information. So what we can do is we can go to the fixed info page and we can insert our entry waypoint via coordinates. So to do that, we're just going to insert the coordinates straight as is. So north 5704.2 and west 0216.7. That's 02016.7. Insert that. I'm going to also put a 20-mile radius around that. And then we can already see our entry point is just in front of us here. That's where we can expect to be within ETOPS airspace. And we're going to continue this trend. We're going to go to next page and we're going to put in our ETP, which is north 59er 02.7 and west 03121.4. Also put 20 miles around that, and then our exit is going to be north 5705.3 and west 04938.9er, and that's going to be our exit point. Also put a 20-mile radius around that. Wonderful. So if you want to check that, we can see this is our entry point, this is our ETP, and then if we zoom out even more or go into plan mode, we can see our exit point right there as well. So everything is available and we have our references. So we know that between this point and this point is our ETOPS, and then our middle point here is our ETP. So that's something you could do as well.